Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. I'm Nika and I make book related videos. And as you can see, today's video is going to be my January wrap up, meaning it's going to be all about the books I read in January. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm not a person who focuses a lot on numbers or statistics when it comes to reading. I don't even, well, this year particularly I haven't even set up my Goodreads goal or anything of that sort. Whatever I'm doing is all offline, so I'm keeping a note of all the books I'm reading and everything on my reading journal. So that's where I'm gonna give you my statistics from. So all right, I read 11 books in January, and I think that's a pretty good number considering how my reading has been going for the last couple of months. In 2023 I barely read and I was not at all happy, and then life got in the way and everything. So I'm really happy that with January I've more or less gotten back into the flow. So that's what this video is going to be all about. So out of all the 11 books I read, only 3 were physical books and the rest were all on Kindle Unlimited. Kindle Unlimited, yeah, and the rest were all on Kindle Unlimited. So I think that's a very good number, because one of my goals this year is to also actually finish reading all the physical books that I own, as you can see. And this is just like 50%, this is like 40% of the books I have here with me. The rest are all stored away in my bed. So anyway, I'm glad that I've made a start, and hopefully as the year progresses I'll read more of the physical books that I already own. So without further ado, I'm first gonna talk about the 3 physical books I read, because they are more so literary fiction. The rest 8 books that I read, they were all romances. So I want to first focus on kind of the literary fiction books before I focus on the romances, so that you as a viewer as well can skip to the part you want to see. Alright, so the first book I'm going to talk about is this, My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. Now, I was seeing this book everywhere on Bookstagram and even on BookTube, and I knew that I really wanted to read this book because I've heard so much about it. I've heard so many rave reviews about it. So I knew that I really wanted to read it. And the thing was, as I was reaching the end of last year, 2023, I felt the same exhaustion, and the whole idea of this book really interested and piqued me. So I knew I wanted to read it, and eventually I got around to it in January. This is actually the second book that I read in January. So before I give you my review, here's a tiny bit from the synopsis. Young, thin, pretty, a recent Columbia graduate, an apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan paid for by her inheritance. Our narrator has many of the advantages of life, but there is a vacuum at the heart of things, and it isn't just the loss of her parents, or the way her Wall Street boyfriend treats her, or her sadomasochistic relationship with her best friend. It is the year 2000 in the world's greatest city, a glitter with wealth and possibility. What could be so terribly wrong? Now, yeah, before we begin, I do have to say that our narrator is an unnamed woman. We do not know what her name is. So basically, as a reader, we get to see this very much, you could say, privileged woman live a life of rest and relaxation as she completely retires from social life and just settles down and lives life in her apartment. And the only way she can do this is by taking drugs, so that she actually sleeps throughout one whole year. So this was a very different read, and I would say a very different concept, because I've never come across anything like this before. It was very, very different. However, I do have to say that at some points, personally, I felt a bit kind of depressed reading it, and overall I wouldn't say that this was my cup of tea. And it was like I was waiting for this year to end for this character, so that she finally is born anew, as if a butterfly from her cocoon. And maybe in a way she does, because she does take some steps that she needed to in order to move on. So in some ways she does move on, or like she is born anew after 1 year of rest and relaxation, but the way she goes through it is something that I could not at all comprehend at all, because if you're taking drugs for 1 whole year just to sleep, and I mean, it did eventually lead her into putting herself in some strange situations, so much so that she had to lock herself in her apartment and essentially be at the mercy of more or less strangers. So that was not something I found to be safe. So throughout my experience of reading this book, I was an anxious and I, oh my god, I cannot speak. So yeah, throughout my reading on this book, I was an anxious pile, and I was just I was hoping to reach the end so that I could see some sort of a resolution of her meeting a conclusion, or like, as I said, being born anew in a way or in a sense that I could resonate with. But of course it was not the case, and so unfortunately I had to give this one sorry 3 stars, because this was definitely not something that I personally I mean, it's just, I don't know how to say this. I guess I still haven't processed what I feel about this book, but you can but I guess you can guess from this rambly sort of review. I would say go in knowing what is going to be more or less discussed in this book, with the substance abuse and everything. And I personally, I felt very depressed reading this book, so I have to give you a fair warning before you yourself go into this. So that's that. So that one was a 3-star for me. Then I also read, I'm actually referring to my list here. I also read my first Murakami in January, and I'm really happy. This one is a very short story. It's called Birthday Girl. So basically this is about this young woman who's working as a waitress in a restaurant, and it is her 20th birthday, I think. But because things don't go as planned, she has to work on her 20th birthday, and on that fateful night she has to go and serve dinner to this reclusive owner of her hotel, basically. And to be honest, as a short story, it was nice, it was good, but I have to say that if there is a hidden meaning inside it, I did not get it. That said, I also read it in quite a bit of rush and sort of like worry, because I was waiting for my flight because it was quite delayed at the airport. So my whole mind was like, I was very frazzled, and I couldn't really read it in the state of mind I would have preferred to. But nonetheless, I didn't really see the point of the story, and I mean, this was my first Murakami, so I actually didn't get the point of it. If you are a regular Murakami reader, or if you have at least more experience than I have, or if you have read this particular story and analyze it, let me know what you think, because I would really love to know what the point of it was, because I really want to know what actually happened, and figure it out. But overall, that said, I really did enjoy it. Even though I did not understand it completely, I rated this one a 3 stars as well. Then the last physical book I have here is essentially the last book I read in January, and it is The Veiled Woman by Iceland. Now this is actually a collection of 4 or 5, let me see, 4 short stories of characters created by Iceland. Now Iceland essentially wrote these stories for a private collector, and these are all eroticas. So it's really interesting to me that stories such as these were written in those times. I mean, I'm sure they were, but actually being confronted with the fact is quite different and unexpected. Just a note here, in the early 1940s, Iceland began writing erotica at $1 a page for an unnamed collector. These pieces were later on published in the 1970s. So essentially these are stories that are written in the 1940s. So what I have to say is that I think the erotica that Anais Nin wrote is quite different from erotica today. And I mean, I've read my fair share of erotica in today's reading scenario, written in today's reading scenario, or contemporary erotica, I would say. But that said, I don't know if it's the fact that these were written in the 1940s, or maybe because Anais Nin was French, I think she was, right? Or these stories are set in France. There is such sensuality to these stories, and mind you, there is a huge difference between sensuality and sexuality, or being sexual. So I think these stories are so beautifully read. It's not just the sex, it's the writing, it's the emotion, it's the sensuality, and I think these are written extremely well, and I think you can definitely give this a try. I love how, you know, the characters, despite these stories being eroticas, are described not only in terms of their physical appearance, but in a way their being as well. So there's this line here: she was extraordinarily lovely, with something of both satin and velvet in her. Her eyes were dark and moist, her mouth glowed, her skin reflected the light. Her body was perfectly balanced. She had the incisive lines of a slender woman, together with a provocative brightness. It's very beautifully written, and this is just one line that I read to you. And there's this one annotation, this note I made: such sensual, slow, and delicious writing. And yeah, you definitely have to try. I really want to read Delta of Venus by Anais Nin, which is this whole collection of stories. But since I've heard so much about her, and since I knew that she wrote erotica, I wasn't sure if it's going to be about me, because I don't really like very hardcore erotica stuff, reading that. I generally prefer, generally speaking, closed door romances and everything. So I was a bit unsure, and that is why when I figured out that I have already got this even shorter collection with just 4 stories, I knew that I should pick it up and figure out for myself if I like it, and if I want to continue on with Anais Nin's writings. And I do. I loved it, and this is a book I would recommend to let's say people above a certain age, of course, because this is, technically speaking, this is 18 plus, but yeah, would definitely recommend this one. I rated it a 4 out of 5 stars, and really excited to read more of this author's works this year. Alright, now moving on to the romances. These, to be very honest, it's been quite some time since I read this book, so I don't completely remember everything about them. So I'm gonna give you a brief go through these stories, and I'll tell you the ratings I gave each one of them. So the first one that I read is Nailed by Claire Wilder. It's a steamy, small town age gap novella. When my grumpy silver fox boss invites me to join him at a career catapulting conference over the holidays, I'm thrilled. While I love my job, his caveman attitude stings, especially because he seems to give it only to me. This conference will be the perfect chance to network with new potential employers while showing my boss just what he'll be missing when I quit. Except, spending a whole weekend with my boss is showing me there might be a reason why he's so grumpy. He's decidedly unboss-like feelings for me. Now, before I begin, I'm going to tell you that this was a novella, so that said, it's a very short read. It occurs between, like, more or less, I was never really sure what the woman's position in the organization was, so it's more so like a employer-employee kind of relationship. I don't think she was completely a secretary, she was most an architect or something of the sort. So there's so that's this whole small town age gap novella, and to be very honest, that's all I remember about it. So maybe that says a lot about why I gave this book a 2 out of 5 stars. So that's that. Then moving on, I am going to share with you this new author's books that I've started reading, and I'm really in love with them, and I think their book covers as well are really nice. So the first book that I picked up was The Wrong Bride by Katharina Mora. She's his fiance's younger sister. He's the man she's always loved. When her sister doesn't show up on her wedding day, Raven has no choice but to take her place. But marriage to Ares Windsor is nothing short of failure. The elusive billionaire media mogul is the man she's always loved, yet he's only ever had eyes for her sister. Married to him at last, Raven is determined to win him over. After all, everything is fair in love and war, and this is war. Now, I have to say that this is one category or one trope that I personally really like reading. When the elder sister doesn't show up, the smaller sister has to take the elder sister's place and marry the man she has secretly always loved. So that's something I really like, and this was the same. That said, this was a very soft and sweet romance because the guy and our heroine, essentially Raven, Ares and Raven, have been friends for a long time. So even after marriage, they try to be nice to each other, and you know, from the beginning it's clear to us as readers, of course, that they love each other. I mean, that he loves her too and everything. We know that she loves him, of course, but the thing is, their love sort of relationship transforms slowly over time, because even then, you know, from the beginning, Ares is someone who really cares about her. They are really good friends. So from the beginning, he is committed to taking care of her, to actually making sure that the vows he took at the altar for her, he carries them out throughout. So there's a lot of noise going on. Kids, you know, can't grudge them their happiness, especially as a corporate employee now. So we'll have to deal with it. But anyway, so that's that. And I think that the romance was soft and sweet and really nice, and one I am really happy that I read. So that said, after I read this book, I knew that Katharina Mora is an author whose books I really want to explore, because I really liked her writing style. And so let's see, I rated this book 3 stars. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, and I really, of course, I like the writing so much that I wanted to keep on reading the author's works. Since we're growing chronologically in terms of the romances I read, the next book I read is by Alexa Riley. It's called Brother's Best Enemy. Now, Alexa Riley is an author. It's actually 2 authors, Alexa and Riley. So the Alexa Riley is like their combined pen name. So Alexa and Riley are authors that I go back to time and time again when I know that I just need something light, and you know what we call mindless fun, you know, that sort of a romance, sort of like a palate cleanser, a book that will help me cleanse my palate essentially between different books. So that's what I did, and this time I read Brother's Best Enemy. So Tinsdale is the town sheriff in Troping, and she loves her job. The only downside is her brother's best friend Jack, who also happens to be her nemesis. He does everything he can to get under her skin, but she's always got a ticket ready to pass out to annoy him right back. Jack has been in love with Tinsdale since his best friend first brought him home from the holidays. The only problem is keeping his distance when all he wants to do is hold her close. For years he's kept his control, but it's not going to last much longer. How can a woman who is hell-bent on making his life miserable be the woman of his dreams? So this is an enemies to lovers and brother's best friend romance. That said, I actually do not remember anything about it. It's been quite some time. I read it on the 10th of January. So I read it like in one single sitting, and I rated it 2 stars. So we'll move on from this one. So the next book that I picked up, the next romance book that I picked up was another Katharina Mora, and this one is called Forever After All. Again, a beautiful cover. Let me share the synopsis. Desperate and out of options, Alina Rousseau walks into a gentleman's club, ready to sell her body in a last attempt to save her mother's life. She didn't expect Alexander Kennedy to be there, and she certainly didn't expect him to propose a marriage of convenience instead. Marrying Alexander means knowingly becoming a tool in his revenge plan. But what choice does she have? Better the devil you know than the one you don't. So this one was like, I would say, childhood friends kind of, because Alina Rousseau and Alexander Kennedy, they used to be childhood friends, but then she drifted apart from the family, a whole lot of drama happened and all that, but now she's back because she needs the money, because her mother's not well, and she's ready to sell her body because she has no other options. And that is when our hero, our knight in shining armor, comes in, Alexander. But of course, he's not a knight in shining armor. He's rude, and he's simply using Alina as a pawn in his whole revenge plan. Alina knows that, and even then she's willing to be a pawn in his revenge plan because she knows that ultimately it's going to save her mother's life. she's the good daughter, she's going to do anything to save her mom. And of course, we as the readers know he's obviously going to be falling in love with her, and they're obviously going to be, you know, living happily ever after, and that's of course what happens. That said, let me tell you that I am a person who only ever reads romance novels with a happily ever after. I personally always figure out or ensure or just do my research that this particular story, whatever I'm about to pick up, has a happy ending. I don't like it when one of the leads dies at the end, or then they don't end up together and all that, because look, life already is difficult, life already has so many different hardships. I don't want even my romance novels, which I really treat as an escape, to have the same issue. I want at least my characters in my dreamscape to have happily ever afters. And I mean, I do get a burst of dopamine after reading all of these romances, so I ensure that all of these are happy endings. Now, Forever After All is a 3-star. I really like it. The character development was also really great, because Alexander is a person who was pretty cold, dark, and essentially he consciously used her as a pawn, but then of course slowly feelings developed and he turns into this better version of himself. So I do like stories which have that sort of a storyline as well, where one of the characters goes through a shift in their personality. So that's that. Forever After All, I rated it another 3 out of 5 stars. And then moving on, I read Bittersweet Memories, again by Katharina Mora. It seems like my January was completely Katharina Mora. So let me tell you the synopsis. When her boyfriend breaks her heart, Alana goes after his older brother in a quest for revenge. It would have been simple if he wasn't also her new boss. As they work together, it soon becomes clear Silas knows more about her than he should. He knows about the past she's forgotten and the memories that evade her, but some secrets are better left buried. Now this is again another trope that I really like, amnesia. One of the characters forgets and then the other one spends his time pining away for them and all of that. So this one is that. Again, that said, it has dual timelines, one when they were young and when they were together, and then one in present times when she's back, but because of certain reasons she has amnesia and she doesn't remember anything. And this is not a spoiler because you figured that out from the first page of the book. So it was another interesting read, and I like how the resolution was done. I would also definitely recommend you to pick this up, because it's very, in a way, it's very motivational as well, if you could say that, because I mean, of course, this is a book and this does not always happen in real life and everything, but basically the guy, both of them had to go through a lot, to grow up, and essentially both of them, more so the guy, our hero Silas, he actually does a lot because his whole goal is to ensure her security, her safety and all that. And as individuals, they both grow a lot as persons in terms of their situations in life, their emotional beings, their mental beings, their health and everything. So I think this was an all-rounder goody book, and I would definitely recommend it to you. That said, I also think it was a bit too long, or maybe it was the usual length, but I felt that it was a bit too long because of the dual timelines. So yeah, overall this was an interesting read and I would recommend it. I rated it another 3 out of 5 stars. Then I actually forgot to tell you about this book that I read, but I don't have this book with me. I think I lent it to a friend. So I also read The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie, which is the first ever Hercule Poirot mystery. So I'm gonna share the synopsis with you all, because I have thoughts about this book. Agatha Christie's debut novel was also the first to feature Hercule Poirot, her famously eccentric Belgian detective. A refugee of the Great War, Poirot has settled in England near Styles Court, the country estate of his wealthy benefactor, the elderly Emily Inglethorpe. When Emily is poisoned and the authorities are baffled, Poirot puts his prodigious sleuthing skills to work. Suspects are plentiful, including the victim's much younger husband, her resentful stepsons, her longtime hired companion, a young family friend working as a nurse, and a London specialist on poisons who just happens to be visiting the nearby village. All of them have secrets they are desperate to keep, but none can outwit Poirot as he navigates the ingenious red herrings and plot twists that contribute to Agatha Christie's well-deserved reputation as the Queen of Mystery. Now, I'm going to begin by saying that I rated it 3 stars, and that surprised me as well. I thought I would love this book because my personal, favorite character by Agatha Christie out of all her creations is Hercule Poirot. I love that whole egg-head-shaped man. Egg-shaped, that man with an egg-shaped head. My God, I cannot speak. But anyway, it was not to be. I thought that there were too many twists and turns, because I also think that this was because maybe this was Agatha Christie's first book, so she was probably coming into her writing style at the time. So unfortunately, I didn't entirely enjoy this book. I thought it was too long, it was too dragged out. The twists and turns were one too many, and I didn't enjoy that. And overall, it wasn't really that interesting. And I also thought the characters were many, but then none of them had, not none, but like many of them did not have redeeming qualities or characteristics worth remembering them. So that was a like issue that I had with the book. So yeah, unfortunately it was a 3 star. I'm very disappointed. This is the first Hercule Poirot as well as the first Agatha Christie book, so I had very, very high expectations from it, but like I said, I was kind of disappointed from that book. Then the 10th book I read, Don't Kiss the Bride by Carrie Cole. Here's the synopsis. I guess you could say I was a damsel in distress and he was my knight in shining armor. But more accurately, I was a girl with a lot of bad luck and he was a guy with a lot of muscles and tattoos. Jude Lucky Lichetti wasn't just a sexy, brooding construction worker. He was my own personal hero who seemed to be in all the right places at the right times. Like when my car broke down and I needed a ride home, and when I face planted on the sidewalk right in front of him and had to be taken to the emergency room. Those weren't exactly my best moments, but they were his. We became friends and it didn't matter that he was 16 years older than me. We had a lot in common, like our love of old rock music and vintage fast cars, and our aversion to relationships. So when he approached me with a crazy idea to help me out, I couldn't say no. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, a marriage on paper and nothing else. It should have been easy, but it wasn't. Because here I am, 18 years old, still in high school, and married to a man I was never supposed to fall in love with. We just had one rule, no kissing the bride. But we broke that rule and it sealed our fate forever. Now hear me out. I generally really love marriage of conveniences, age gap romances, but when the girl is in high school, albeit she's 18, and we cannot ignore that fact, I just felt really, really weird. But once I willfully suspended my disbelief, I more or less enjoyed it. It was fun for a one-time read. Like I said, this was a nice palette cleanser, and I would definitely recommend as a palette cleanser, because I know that sometimes there are some romance books that you read just for the sake of reading, and there are some romance books that you read because you have heard so much about them and there is substance in them. Unfortunately, this, in my opinion, belonged to the first category, where I think it did not have much substance and it was just at best a palette cleanser. So yeah, I mean, emotions developed, they started falling for each other and everything, but in my mind I just cannot move past the fact that she's 18 years old, and that was one of the contentions these characters also had in the book. But I mean, 16 years of age gap doesn't seem a lot when, let's say, you're 25, he's, do the math, when the person with the lower age limit is like 25 to 30, and then the other one is whatever he is. But if you're 18 and the guy is 16 years older than you, then that's a lot, and I really could not move past that. So the romance seemed unlikely to me. It kind of seemed forced or fabricated, so that was not something I was in the mood for. So ultimately, yeah, I ended up giving this book 3 stars, but now that I'm thinking back on it, maybe I should have given it 2 stars now that I'm talking about it. So yeah, this was it. Again, I wouldn't really recommend this book unless you just want to pass the time and want a palette cleanser. Then the last book I read in terms of the romance. And the ninth book I read in January was, I'm so embarrassed to even talk about this one. It's called Mated to the Monster by Sarah Spade. Now this is a nice enough cover, although weird. So here's the synopsis. I really should have known better than to play around with that old book of spells. How was I supposed to know that the incantations scrawled inside of it worked? That the first one I read would open a portal into a demon plane, or that the next one was an unbreakable vow to the 7-foot tall shadow monster I unwittingly summoned into my bedroom. He says his name is Malphas, that he's something called a Sombra demon, and I'm his mate. Monster demon, whatever he is, his muscles are bigger than my head. Um, I don't know if mate means the same thing to him as it does to me, but he's gotta be kidding. Spoiler alert, he's not. Man has been waiting for more than 1,000 years for the one woman meant for him. He's convinced that it's me, and he's willing to do anything to prove it. And maybe there's something really wrong with me, because before long I find myself eager to let him try. I'm just so embarrassed even reading out that synopsis. So like mentioned in that synopsis, that girl finds a grimoire and she thinks it's a love spell, so she does it. Turns out her mate is this shadow demon with actual horns and everything, and it was just so weird. Again, that said, it was a very, very short novella, and I laughed throughout it, and I was in disbelief. And that said, this one is not a closed door romance, so I hope you go in knowing that. And I don't know, it was just it was just weird, and I feel shy after reading out that synopsis, which by the way I kind of censored for this video. So anyway, I ended up giving this book a 2 out of 5 stars. This I think was this and Brothers Best Enemy by Alexa Riley. These two were the lowest rated stars in my whole reading of January, and I think I rated The Veiled Women by Iceland the most, that is 4 stars. So that's a wrap of my whole reading this month. 11 books, some very good, some very funny, some nice palette cleansers, one actually really good one, and one quite depressing. So yeah, that's my wrap up of this month. I hope you enjoyed seeing me try to recall what I felt about these romance books, because let me tell you, unless it's like a full-length novel romance, you generally do not remember the novellas. At least I don't know if that's something that happens to you all as well, but I'm generally a person who just forgets the romance after forgets the story after it's been some time. So that's what happened to me as well. Clearly you can see in the video. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again very, very soon. I am thinking of making my February TBR, but you know what, I'm not going to film a TBR and force myself into reading the books. The only books I generally try to read immediately are the review copies that I receive, because you know there's the whole issue with the timing and the publishing date and everything. But other than that, I generally have a brief idea of the books I want to read, not necessarily in that particular month, but in general, the books I really want to read immediately. So I go through that, and that's what's been happening recently. I'll maybe film another video very, very soon, and until then, take care, peace out. And if you like this video, don't forget to click on the thumbs up icon and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you again very, very soon. Take care, peace out, bye.